My name is Zenaida Gould, and I am the Interim Executive Director of the Mexican American Civil Rights Institute, or MACRI. It is a pleasure to be with you this morning for our virtual launch. I'm joined by our Board of Directors and staff to have a conversation about what MACRI is and who are the people behind its formation. I'm a public historian, and I've spent my career in museums and archives. These are places where history is both kept and presented to the public. They are also places with their own histories, often including histories of exclusion when it comes to telling stories of people of color. For many years, cultural workers like myself have called for more inclusive archives and museums and for spaces to tell our own stories, because we know our field is not neutral. Over the last several years, Mexican Americans and other people of color have experienced an increase in public displays of blatant discrimination. And just this year, we have experienced both the collective trauma of the COVID-19 pandemic and the resurgence of a long existing anti-racist movement that we are proud to support. At this critical time, we are excited to launch an institute that is by, for, and about Mexican American civil rights history. I'd like to ask our board chair and founder, Dr. Paul Ruiz, to tell us about how MACRI came into existence.
Yes.
Buenos dias. I am Dr. Paul Ruiz, chairman of the board of the Mexican American Civil Rights Institute, otherwise known as MACRI. I am honored to share with all of you a short overview of how MACRI has evolved over the past several years. Of course, this short overview is not the end of the story, but merely its beginning. But the big picture is much more precious. It is that all of you have game in making MACRI a reality. And the MACRI depends on all of you for its success. You cannot imagine how honored and excited I am to join with the board and with all of you in proclaiming that we will not forget, that we will work diligently to establish MACRI as the premier Mexican American Civil Rights Institute in the nation. When I was a senior at Breckenridge High School, like generations before me, I was growing up not knowing my history, the struggles of my grandparents and great-grandparents. Worse, I went to school being told by the system that to succeed, I somehow had to lose my Mexican heritage. Later at St. Mary's, I began to learn and discover the systemic and institutional barriers faced by earlier generations, and I discovered the rich history of a beginning civil rights story that was being forged right here in San Antonio and shared with the rest of the nation. After St. Mary's, I went to work at Central Michigan University to recruit and enroll the children of migrant workers into the university. I stayed in Michigan 18 years, and for those 18 years, all of us in Michigan and the Midwest looked to San Antonio and South Texas for ideas, for strategies, for ways of solving problems like education and health and economic opportunity, so that we could carry these ideas into our communities in the Midwest. I then went on to co-found the Education Trust, a national K-12 reform movement, where even from Washington, I saw the immense energy, the commitment, the ideas, the amazement, the amazing dedicated activists that were coming out of San Antonio. My wife, Margie, and I returned to San Antonio in 2006 to be close to family once again. I was delighted to be home, of course, but within 3 years, I was going through heart surgery. But the good news is that it gave me time to get off the merry-go-round and think a bit and reflect a bit over my previous 36 years of educational work in schools and colleges, especially serving low-income and minority students. I lamented coming back home that current generations in San Antonio and South Texas were once again growing up not knowing their history like me. They were growing up, in essence, in a historical vacuum. Once again, our children and grandchildren were growing up not learning, not knowing, not honoring the heroic and transformative history of Mexican American civil rights being born right here in San Antonio. I wondered out loud if maybe the community of San Antonio was too close to the trees to appreciate, to celebrate the great civil rights leaders and social justice agents, events, organizations being born right here in San Antonio and given to the rest of the nation. By 2013, as I continued to complain, my wife, Margie, finally said, you know what, you need to stop complaining and start doing. So I began to talk to whoever would listen, dozens of friends, colleagues, family members, about the need for San Antonians to embrace, to stop walking away from our histories, to honor, to celebrate the great, great gifts coming out of San Antonio. I imagined a civil rights galeria or center focused on Mexican American civil rights. Ironically, everybody I spoke to agreed that we had a great story to tell, that we needed to showcase these great leaders and great organizations so that the rest of the world would know all the wonderful contributions and difficult struggles of our grandparents and great-grandparents. The funny thing is that my friends, both from San Antonio and from throughout the nation, it seemed were singing the same song. As we all know, great ideas need committed and collaborative folks to make them work. In 2016, a small cadre of friends here in San Antonio met with Ron Nuremberg, then council member. We shared with him this idea, along with other issues that we had involving health and education in San Antonio. 2 years later, in late 2018, my friend Aurelio Montemayor from IDRA called me up and said, Paul, we have a meeting with the organizing committee of celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Chicano student walkouts in San Antonio. The group is meeting and we'd like for you to come. I'd like for you to come and share with them your idea, which I did. And wow, what a wonderful surprise. Ms. Velma Ibarra, Drs. Henry Flores, Antonia Castañeda, Sarah Gould, they all agreed to form a working committee. Soon afterwards, we were joined by Dr. Gloria Rodriguez and Ms. Olga Kauffman, who joined us as well. We diligently worked and met at least twice monthly to discuss, conceptualize, and otherwise form this Civil Rights Institute. Attorney Carlos Resendez worked on and filed our 501c3 incorporation papers. And along the way, we were also honored to add Drs. Lilliana Saldaña and Ezequiel Peña. Later on, Attorney Marisa Bono and Dr. Robert Garza, president of Palo Alto College, also joined the board. During the first 9 months, and many hours later of committee work, strategy meetings, conversations, and sessions with city council members, and with the guidance of 3 great council staffers, the City Council of San Antonio awarded MACRI $250,000 a year for 2 years so that we could begin to plan, conceptualize, and structure the MACRI for success. Moreover, we were excited as well to receive a small grant from our county commissioners. The MACRI board was honored and blessed as well to have Our Lady of the Lake University, one of our finest institutional partners. The university agreed very early on to house the MACRI, and moreover to land Dr. Ezequiel Peña to us as our first interim executive director. Now he has to return back to teaching, and we are equally excited and proud to transition to our new executive team, led by Dr. Sarah Gould, executive director, and Barbara Aguirre, our administrator. And so, as you can imagine, MACRI belongs to all who embrace social justice and fair play. It belongs to you, who have committed never to forget the many struggles of our community, the untold stories, the transformative leaders, the capstone events, and unselfish organizations that have stood up for justice and equal treatment for all, but also have worked tirelessly against prejudice, bigotry, and racism. It belongs to you. We shall remain diligent so that we and our children and their children, whether in San Antonio or Saginaw, Corpus or Compton, Minneapolis or McAllen will never forget either. So please join us in this work. We need your personal and financial support. Your contributions are vital. Bienvenidos y muchas gracias.
Thank you, Paul. I am Dr. Gloria Rodriguez, Vice Chairman of MACRI. The MACRI board came together with a common purpose: to tell our important stories on the history of Mexican American civil rights, because they were not being recorded or told correctly. MACRI will fill this void. We will research, chronicle, and showcase our true civil rights history and make it available to the masses so that people, especially Mexican Americans, can learn from them, get involved, and not let the injustices, discrimination, and racism against our people be repeated or tolerated. We want Mexican Americans to learn and be proud of those transformational leaders who fought for justice, fairness, and equity, and who made lasting contributions and institutional changes for our civil rights and our pursuit of happiness. We will begin when Texas was annexed from Mexico in 1845, when our struggles really began with segregation and discrimination, when lands were stolen, when our language and culture was denied, and yes, even when Mexican Americans were killed and lynched. We will showcase individuals, organizations, legal cases, public policy, and events that, one, affected the lives of Mexican Americans and Mexican American communities, that had systemic institutional change, had state, regional, and national impact, that were innovative, pioneering, creating new visions, opening doors, and breaking barriers. MACRI will document the lives of leaders who took professional and personal risks, sacrificed for what they believed in, and displayed courage, determination, and perseverance. We will begin with San Antonio's legacy, because MACRI is rooted and was inspired by what happened in San Antonio, as Dr. Ruiz stated. When I first met Dr. Ruiz, he told me about the time that Henry Cisneros went to Michigan, and he spoke about the many successful nationally recognized organizations that were implemented here in San Antonio. AVANCE, which I was the founder and president and CEO for 32 years, was one of them. I designed a comprehensive early childhood, family support, community-based program that changed the lives of tens of thousands of parents and children in poor, high-risk Mexican American communities. From a research paper that I did at Our Lady of the Lake University, interviewing the parents of my classroom children, I had an aha moment, and that inspired me to leave teaching and to start AVANCE. There are many more individuals from San Antonio who have their own stories to tell. They too saw a need, got frustrated or angry, and did something about it. For example, Willie Velasquez started Southwest voter registration to get Mexican American people registered to vote. Pancho Velasquez got to work with the Mexican government to get the different Mexican Americans to become doctors to work in poor communities. Padres, made up of a group of Catholic priests, joined forces to demand changes in the parish neighborhoods and demanded that the Catholic Church have the first Mexican American bishop. Out of their efforts, we got COPS, Archbishop Patricia Flores, and inner city development. Their efforts affected priests all over the nation. Ernie Cortez became the first executive director of COPS and co-chaired IAF, and they demanded that poor Mexican American communities have proper drainage, lights, and economic development. MALDEF, and we're so proud of MALDEF that originated here in San Antonio, who have fought so many battles for fair treatment for Latinos in the classroom, workplace, and the courtroom. They fought for voter rights, school finance, and immigration. HACU was founded also in San Antonio, and they represent about 450 colleges and universities, and is committed to help Hispanics achieve success in higher education. IDRA is another one that started in San Antonio. Jose Cardenas led that organization on issues like school finance as well, bilingual education, desegregation, and focus on school dropout. I could just go on and on about the many organizations and individuals that really made a difference that came from San Antonio. Henry Cisneros, Julian and Joaquin Castro, Henry B. Gonzalez, they all impacted national public policy. There was Emma Tenayuca, a labor leader, a union organizer who organized Mexican American workers in Texas and led the first pecan sheller strike. Maria Berriozábal, who was the first Latina city councilwoman whose agenda was always the development of the human capital. Her husband, Manuel Berriozábal, started the PREP program in San Antonio, and it expanded nationally to help students in math, science, and engineering. There was Joe Bernal, who joined Carlos Truan and championed bilingual education in the schools. We have Graciela Sanchez, who fought on LGBT rights. The student walkout was here in San Antonio, where students demanded better schools. I could go on and on and on. And that is, we still have so many other all over the nation, like giants like Cesar Chavez, who fought for farm worker rights, and Hector P. Garcia, who founded the GI Forum, fought for veterans' rights and against discrimination in education, jobs, housing, and healthcare. And then, of course, there's LULAC. But lastly is the man who is known as the pioneer of Mexican American civil rights out of Corpus Christi, Gus Garcia. He won a legal battle and was the first Mexican American to win a legal battle in the Supreme Court and established the rights of Mexican Americans to serve on juries. This monumental case led to legal cases involving housing, education, and employment discrimination. Wow, we all have to learn about all of these individuals, organizations, and events, and that is what MACRI is going to do. We will not allow the stereotypes, the injustices to happen again. And we saw that when Mexican Americans were called rapists and drug dealers. And we saw parents being separated from their children in the border. This really woke many Mexican Americans up and said, we have to organize. We have to speak up. We need to remain vigilant and learn from the past so that we do not allow bad, ugly history against Mexican Americans repeat itself. We have to make sure that we hear the voices of those that spoke and fought before and learn that one person can change things for the better. I want to thank the funders, the San Antonio City Council, for supporting us and ask you to also join us and be part of this exciting new initiative that is so long overdue. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gloria, for recounting that rich history of San Antonio and the role it's had in advancing Mexican American civil rights. It's great to see how San Antonio is also connected to the nation in terms of expanding the conversation about Mexican American civil rights as part of the overall national conversation. It's also great to hear you talk about Our Lady of the Lake and your role with AVANCE. And as a beloved alumna of the Lake, we both know that Our Lady of the Lake has served as an incubator for organizations such as AVANCE and such as the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities. I'm really excited that we have yet another organization with which to partner, and that's the Mexican American Civil Rights Institute. So we're delighted on behalf of Our Lady of the Lake University that we can bring the Mexican American Civil Rights Institute to Our Lady of the Lake and give it a home in its early development. It's been an honor to serve on MACRI's board of directors, as well as to help us establish the Institute. The 2018-2019 academic year was a very exciting year for us at the Lake, as we were hosting the 50th anniversary conference of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights hearing on Mexican Americans in the Southwest. The hearing consisted of a week-long series of meetings with the Mexican American community concerning the state of our civil rights in this country. The hearing was held on the campus of Our Lady of the Lake University in the Sacred Heart Chapel Auditorium in November of 1968. 50 years later, we hosted a conference in the same location to commemorate that landmark civil rights event. As a result of the energy the 50th anniversary conference created, leading up to, during, and after the conference, there were many exciting conversations about next steps, keeping the momentum, and finding some way to put into action the energy and spirit evoked during the conference. Clearly, it was many paths leading to this one time in which we were going to commemorate a 50th anniversary in Mexican American civil rights. Paul and Gloria had talked about how since 2016, right, conversations about the Mexican American Civil Rights Institute were taking place. And yet we had a place now in November of 2018 to have those conversations, to create a reunion for all of our civil rights leaders that were coming together to celebrate this landmark event. There were documents being floated around during that time, meetings planned, and even a conference of the Chicano student walkouts planned for the following year. Then in the summer of 2019, a friend and colleague of mine, Joe Bravo, who was then serving in City Council District 7, invited me to attend one of the meetings of the Institute. I attended a meeting at Councilwoman Ano Sandoval's District 7 office to discuss the formation of the Institute. It was a busy summer, so I wasn't able to return to those meetings until after Paul, the chairman of the board, and I were able to meet for lunch at Lisa's restaurant on Bandera. It was a great conversation during that lunch. It was a great lunch too. And I can tell you that I was completely inspired by the vision Paul shared with me. I could see it. I could picture the Institute and its national importance, and its importance to the Mexican American community, and the importance to San Antonio and South Texas. He shared with me the work that the board was doing, the labor of love of all of the board members, and how it had come together so organically as a result of these passions that each board member brought to the organization. So once we had that conversation, I was on board, and it's been exciting to see how we've moved further along that path since that day. I can truly see the ways in which San Antonio is one of the most important, if not the most important, incubators of Mexican American civil rights. And we're so proud and happy to have the Mexican American Civil Rights Institute here at San Antonio, and excited to share it with the rest of the nation. I'd also like to extend my gratitude to Dr. Sarah Zenaida Gould for taking on this next step of our development to lead us and lead the board in guiding us into the future for the Mexican American Civil Rights Institute. It's been great to watch her work with the board and to work with our various consultants. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the development of our mission and vision statement. It's gone through an incredible process of evolution since our founding, and it's great to see how we've done a very thoughtful incremental process in getting us to this place of establishing a mission and vision that we can share with San Antonio, with South Texas, and with the rest of the nation. I'm very proud of the process we've gone through to come up with our mission, vision, and guiding principles. It's such an exciting time being part of the founding board of the Mexican American Civil Rights Institute. We've had lots and lots of board meetings, specially called meetings. We've done drafts, strategic planning, soul searching, wordsmithing meetings, all to bring us to a place where we can be sure that we have a mission and a vision that speaks to the whole swath of the Mexican American community. With the help of OCI, a social purpose consulting firm, we revisited some of our founding documents, and it's been so helpful to have that outside lens and that external guide to lead us through this process. So I'm excited to share with you our new and refined mission statement. Rooted in and inspired by San Antonio's legacy, the Mexican American Civil Rights Institute is the premier national organization dedicated to chronicling and advancing the Mexican American community's civil rights efforts in the US. When we were revising the mission statement, we wanted to make sure that we were capturing simultaneously the local and the national aspects of our mission, and even international aspects of our mission. We're national in two ways. In the first sense, we want to highlight the ways in which civil rights efforts that originated in San Antonio and South Texas had a national impact. Then we're also national, and that we'll be involved with national stories related to Mexican American civil rights and with other movements in which we'll be in solidarity. Now I'll share a little bit about our vision. Now, as we know, vision statements are aspirational in nature. It's where we see ourselves heading. So I'd like to share with you our vision statement. The Mexican American Civil Rights Institute envisions communities where all Americans are inspired by the Mexican American civil rights legacy and see themselves as participants and transformational leaders in the ongoing struggle for social justice, inclusion, and equity. So it's great to just sit with that vision, right, and think about where we want to go in our development as an institute. We want all the folks who come and join us in some form or another in the institute to be participants, to feel engaged. And we also want it to be a training ground for future transformational leaders who are going to lead us into the next generation of Mexican American civil rights, social justice, inclusion, and equity.
Thank you, Ezequiel. And now we're going to have some of our board members speak about our guiding principles and beliefs.
Buenos dias. My name is Olga Garza Kauffman, and I am a board member of the Mexican American Civil Rights Institute. I wanted to talk a little bit about our principles, and there's one really special one that Dr. Peña assigned me, and I'm glad he did because it represents my life. And let me say it to you first, and then I'll explain. Our roots are in the San Antonio and South Texas. San Antonio and the South Texas region are the birthplace of numerous significant Mexican American social justice organizations, leaders, and historic events that have shaped the history of civil rights in the United States. And I think the reason that's important to me because I have lived in San Antonio now most of my life, but I grew up in South Texas on the border with Mexico. And yes, all of the civil rights things that happened throughout South Texas, really, I think a lot of them had a big impact on San Antonio, and San Antonio took that civil rights football, for lack of a better term, and really ran with it. And as a result, you know, there was walkouts where I grew up in South Texas. Ed Cauchelsa had one of the very first Mexican American student walkouts. I was too young back then to participate, and anyway, my parents wouldn't have let me. So that's that. But then there was Crystal City, again, Jose Angel Gutierrez and all the work that they did in Crystal City. And then in San Antonio, we had walkouts. And we just celebrated the 50th anniversary of those walkouts a few years ago. And they had some marvelous events remembering those walkouts. So a lot of the organizations that were dedicated to Mexican American civil rights were rooted in San Antonio. For example, MALDEF, which is now a national nonprofit law firm, and that has done civil rights lawsuits all over the country and even internationally. But it was born right here in San Antonio on Houston Street. We have, of course, AVANCE, that was founded by Dr. Rodriguez. We have South Voter Registration and Education, founded by Willie Velasquez here in San Antonio, and also became a national organization. We have IDRA, which is one of the premier bilingual educational research institutions in the world. And it was born right here in San Antonio, founded by Dr. Jose Cardenas. So there's so many more. Even NCLR was incubated in San Antonio at the Mexican American Unity Council offices for a few years in the 1960s. So San Antonio has been part of the national Mexican American civil rights movement from the very beginning. And I'm proud to say that a lot of these organizations I have worked with throughout my career, either as a staff person or on the board of directors of a lot of these institutions. So I have learned a lot, and I have been inspired by many of these organizations. And they are very varied. They are legal, educational, even the arts. We have a lot of Mexican American Chicano arts organizations, including the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center, which I was proud to serve as a board member for about 15 years. So all of these organizations are now nationally known, but they continue to do a lot of work in San Antonio, and they continue to be San Antonio centered. So I think that MACRI would like to honor the legacy of these organizations and make sure that their work, not only here in San Antonio and Texas, but all over the United States, continues, and that their work is chronicled and honored. And that is one of the things that I am looking most forward to working as a board member with MACRI, is continue the legacy, but make sure that that legacy becomes known among civil rights and regular citizens all over this country, that they continue to thrive, and that their history is chronicled so that our children can also learn about, our children and grandchildren can also learn about them as they go out into the world as Mexican Americans, as proud Mexican Americans.
My name's Marisa Bono. I was a civil rights attorney with MALDEF, the Mexican American Legal Defense Fund, for almost 10 years. And about 3 years ago, I entered public service as Mayor Nuremberg's chief of policy for his first term. And now I'm chief strategic officer at VIA, our transit authority, our local transit authority. I'm really proud to serve on the board of MACRI. MACRI continues the legacy of Mexican American social justice activism and advocacy. We believe that the knowledge of our civil rights history inspires action to advance social justice, amplify voices, and enhance the quality of life of individuals, families, and communities.
Hello, my name is Velma Vela Ibarra, and I am very proud to be here as a member of the board for MACRI, the Mexican American Civil Rights Institute. I am a 46-year educator, K through 12 primarily, and I am here today to talk about a couple of things briefly. First, what events or individuals impacted my life and my interest in education, primarily civil rights in education. And then secondly, to talk a little bit about why we have the mention of the many organizations that have been reviewed today because of the leadership that was provided back when and continues today to promote civil rights. First, I'd like to say this. This Mexican American Civil Rights Institute, we firmly believe is going to be a model for others across the country on celebrating the achievements, celebrating the heroes, and teaching especially our youth in the schools about the events and the heroic acts. MACRI is going to also make sure that, as has been mentioned earlier, that people know about the sufferings. It is very important that that happen. Why? Mexican Americans are today the largest minority group and growing in the United States. And if this country is to be a model for others in the world on how to provide peace, unity, economic equity, then we have to start with our educational system. And that educational system must include the civil rights, the language, the contributions of all of our groups in this country. The current state of affairs right now in our country speaks strongly to the need for such an effort. Our race relations hurt in a way where we know that all of our students deserve a right to know about how they can live in a world that can be kinder and that can treat others fairly so that we can have peace and unity and economic development for all. The impact that my own K through 12 education had in my involvement with education as well as with civil rights. I attended the San Felipe School District in San Felipe del Rio on the Coahuila, Texas border. The very, very first desegregation court case that occurred historically in this state occurred as a result of parents from San Felipe back in 1930 deciding that they were not going to accept that the Mexican American and Black kids in the San Felipe neighborhood could not attend the better and newer facilities on the Del Rio side across the river. LULAC at that time had just been born in 1928. So when these parents, Salvatierra and others, chose to go into court, I'm very proud to say that LULAC, the League of United Latin American Citizens, had just been born, and they went around the entire state to the councils, brand new councils, and collected $20 to $25 so that that case could go into court. Eventually, of course, there were others. San Felipe continued as a segregated community, and it was not until 1973 when we had professors in our school systems like Dr. Blandina Cárdenas Flores, like Aurelio Montemayor, like Dr. Ruben Flores, who is the father of our current director of the Alamo Community College District, who inspired us, who allowed us to question why back in 1969, we were still the only district that did not have a cafeteria, and we did not even have a gym. And why? Because back then, every year for decades, the students from the Laughlin Air Force Base, primarily Anglo, good kids, would bypass San Felipe because we were so poor, okay? So it took professors like the ones I mentioned and many others who led us to start a survey and ask the parents at Laughlin, why wouldn't your son or daughter want to attend our district? Things evolved, wound up in court again, and in 1973, the San Felipe Del Rio situation was finally desegregated and the two districts formed together. My point being in that in educational systems, there must be educators that will inspire, that will allow kids to feel wonderful about themselves and that they have a right to learn and question and evaluate what their situation was on. As our teachers would tell us, why are we one of the only districts without a gym? We'd use the gym at the Catholic church. And why are we one of the only ones in the state that still does not have a cafeteria. So those type of events, those type of organizations, those type of educators really impacted my involvement. I was fortunate then to have worked for 18 years with the Crystal City School District after their people had fought for civil rights in education, the right to speak their language, the right not to get spanked anymore. This was happening all over the state and the country, and who really opened the door for not only a bilingual, bicultural, but a multicultural type of educational setting in not only in Crystal City, but in the entire state, and served as a model on what a transitional program and a maintenance program could work like. You can learn your second language through your first language, and there's no reason why you have to stop your first one after you transition. You can still maintain it. So that transitional and maintenance models became the forefront of educational training for many of our educators in bilingual education. So I'm fortunate to, last comment here is, and I know that everyone will agree, that we had parents who along the way told us, mija, yo nunca quiero saber que tú le niegas los saludes o la ayuda a ninguna persona. Eso es algo que nunca quiero oír. And that's how many of our educators trained us in that spirit, and why we are here to try to contribute to MACRI. And thank you to our city government and everyone who has contributed an endless number of hours to get our launch going here today. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Lilliana Patricia Saldaña, and I'm an associate professor in Mexican American Studies at the University of Texas at San Antonio. Over the past 5 to 6 years, I've been involved in local and statewide efforts to implement Mexican American Studies and other ethnic studies programs in our K-12 schools. I'm proud to serve in an organization that honors the Mexican American community's history of activism. As an organization, we strongly believe that it is important to chronicle, to document, and to share this rich history of Mexican American civil rights. We believe that people-powered movements are incredibly important to our community. People-powered movements have the ability to bring hope to our communities that continue to struggle with systems of oppression. People-powered movements also have the ability to restore our dignity in the face of white supremacy, in the face of xenophobia. And people-powered movements have the ability to teach people in our community, especially future generations, about the value of understanding our history and our social movements and the power of people coming together to fight against injustice and inequality.
So I want to thank each and every one of you for showing up today and giving me an opportunity to participate in this very important and historic day. You've heard from so many amazing people that serve on the MACRI board, and I am so proud to serve along with them. Their stories resonate with me on a personal level and on a professional level like no other. When my family came into the United States many, many years ago, and I learned only until my 30s the struggles that they had to go through in speaking the language that they did not speak, and even just asking to go to the bathroom. And educators shaking my mom and having her stand up and sit down in a chair, thinking that she was teaching her English, and my mom telling me that all she knew what to do was to cry because she didn't know what she was saying, or why this lady was picking her up and shaking her and picking her up and throwing her in this chair. It runs deep. These things run deep. But as parents, and particularly as Latinos or Mexican American parents, we tend to hide and not share these stories with our children because sometimes we feel that it's shameful. But what it does is it motivates us and empowers us to continue to tell the story. And that's what the MACRI board and the MACRI mission does. It tells a story. Oftentimes, as an educator, I will tell you that I meet with students every single day. And when I hear stories about students who think that they can't, they shouldn't, and they never will, because they've heard it day after day after day. And I'm not talking about 50 years ago. I'm talking about from 5 minutes ago. These things happen continuously, and unfortunately, our children are growing up with a sense of they can't. And as they get older, they don't understand those contexts of the struggles of those before them and those doors that have been opened, albeit some of them slightly, so that they can jump up and kick that door wide open for others to come. And so until we have these conversations, until we know where we've come from, we will never know where we're going. And our youth and all of us together can really make a difference. Whether it's my story or your story, the MACRI wants to capture it so that we can continue to share this common goal of equity and social justice for everyone. I will tell you that one of the challenges that I have is that I'm really tired. I'm getting older, but I'm tired of hearing that people can't, shouldn't, and won't. Because there's this concept, and sometimes it's used as a si se puede, and that's something that we can all rally around, and we need to rally around it so that we can continue to tell the stories for future generations to come and say that it is okay to question and to ask and to demand equal treatment and social justice for not just one, but everyone. And that's what the MACRI board and the MACRI organization does. So I encourage you to please engage with us, engage with my colleagues here on the board, and help us truly make a difference in the lives of our children and for future generations to come. Thank you again for giving me this opportunity to talk with you today and to be part of this historic and important event. Thank you.
My name is Barbara Aguirre, Administrator for the Mexican American Civil Rights Institute, or MACRI. Having been a lifelong civil rights activist, I have firsthand experience in the Mexican American struggles. Today is an important moment in time for our nation as we officially launch MACRI, the premier national organization dedicated to chronicling and advancing the Mexican American community's civil rights efforts in the United States, something that is long overdue. MACRI will be the first of its kind in the nation and stands up against a climate of bigotry and fear to declare that Mexican American civil rights matter. At the Mexican American Civil Rights Institute, we will help inform local decision makers to create a more inclusive, wholesome, civically engaged, and just community. We will contribute to creating a more inclusive community for families, academics, professionals, and community members from all over our state, nation, and the globe. Through local scholarly expertise and civic leadership, MACRI will deepen understanding, broaden civic responsibilities, and help the community to be more tolerant and respectful. Mexican American children and families, as well as others, have an opportunity to learn about their history and identity. This will enhance their self-esteem, pride, and self-confidence. San Antonians of all ages will be inspired and enlightened as they learn of the struggles of those who came before them. Residents from all socioeconomic groups will benefit from knowing the history and contributions of Mexican Americans and will create a common history that will nurture and continue to unite our region. The Institute will stimulate the economy and put a national spotlight on local achievements. Today, I ask you to please help us to continue the important work of the MACRI by joining us as a founding member of the Patronato. The Patronato is a centuries-old tradition in the Americas that brought together a community's leading citizens to support charitable, cultural, and patriotic initiatives. The Patronato is being organized to develop and ensure the stability of the Macri perpetuity. We hope that you will join us as a founding member to continue the legacy of Mexican-American civil rights history for many years to come. Please visit our website and click on the donate button to learn more about becoming a part of the Patronato and to make your contribution today. Mil gracias y sí se puede.
The Mexican American Civil Rights Institute is a premier institute in the making. I hope you'll join us for the rest of today's virtual launch. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and visit our website. More virtual programming will be announced soon. Thank you.